Welcome, everyone. Thanks, CTSI, for having me. I am Kate Goudreau. I'm trying to get used to this layout. But welcome to everybody who's logged in remotely. For those of you who are attending here in person, great. I've been invited here to talk about IRB submissions and the research as part of the Coordinator Enrichment series. So hopefully we will get into materials from what we expect with IRB submissions, sort of some of the scope, et cetera. And at any time, if you've got questions, Sarah, just raising hands probably works best.
Yeah, you can drop it in the chat. Feel free to also unmute yourself. Don't feel like you're interrupting us. We welcome that.
I'm just speaking for you, Kate. No, that's, I like that. Thank you. Okay. Let's see if we can make this go forward. Perfect. Okay. Not a problem. Yeah, that was our IT glitch portion of this presentation. Yes. Yeah. All right. So moving forward, this is the agenda. We're going to talk about who does MCW IRB review for on the behalf of, what we've invited to review for, different types of IRB reviews. Also too, we'll talk a little bit about submissions, just again, a high level overview. I'll also point you in the direction of some of our ongoing educational and training sessions that we do offer out of the HRPP office. And then we're going to talk a bit about real-time requests. And then finally, I like to call this the questions and answer portion with the MCW IRB coordinators. And I'm really glad to have my colleagues here from the office to be able to field those questions, because they are the subject matter experts with those submissions coming in. So we'll get to that introduction as we move forward into this presentation. All right. So quick overview, MCW IRB, we review research, human subjects research on behalf of MCW, Freighter Health, Versity, and then most recently, Children's has identified MCW IRB as their IRB of record. They do maintain their own what's considered an HRPP, which is a Human Research Protection Program. That means that they have their own institutional policies, their own educational expectations, but that they have sort of contracted MCW IRB to do the IRB review for the research that's happening at CW. So I make that distinction because it's key. Meanwhile, Versity, Freighter, and MCW, all of our policies work in coordination with each other. I also just want to call out too, because folks might have where their research might be relying on another IRB of record, such as Vanderbilt or Indiana, or one of the fantastic independent or commercial IRBs. Those are quite rare, but we do have a process and agreements that are set up that we would then allow in certain cases to have another IRB to provide that oversight for research that would be happening here, either at MCW, Freighter, Versity. Children would make their own decision about whether that would happen or not. So that's the lay of the land. Just again, bring everybody up to speed. Human subject research, this is what we're talking about. First, research. This is actually how it kind of looks in the real world. There's the research question, but it sometimes, bumps into quality improvement, sometimes case reports and case studies. We've got teaching. The only one that's truly separate is, I'm glad to say, clinical care. If you're doing clinical care, most likely you're not doing research. If you have a question about that, though, please call us here in the IRB office, and we are happy to walk through those questions and those answers. When we talk about human subjects, first and foremost, we're looking at, is it a living human being? Yes. Okay, we're in the right direction then. Otherwise, you might be working with individuals who are deceased, and you're working with their identifiable information, such as it could be private information, health information, and it can have identifiers on top of it. All of those aspects fall into defining what is a human subject per the regulations. So when we talk about human subject research, we mean these two together as part of your research. And this is the decision tree that we use within the IRB office. Again, this comes from the federal regulations. OHRP has a wonderful decision tree that walks through the different determination aspects, but really, at the end of the day, this is where we start with our question, which is this research? Yes, no, and by research, you have to meet a certain definition, systematic investigation designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge. Are we dealing with human subjects? Are they living? Are you working with some, doing an intervention or an interaction to collect some data, or are you working completely separate, no contact with the individual, but you are handling potentially identifiable private information, and that includes PHI. Then we go into, if we've marked yes and yes to those, congratulations, winner, winner, chicken dinner. You are coming to then the IRB to do and have a review. And the IRB will make that assessment about exempt, expedited, and full committee review types and pathways. So when we talk about those different types of review pathways, this is where I always say it gets real interesting. So we review our applications in accordance with federal regulations. The federal regulations really set forth the guidelines and the expectations of what we need to review, how we should review it, et cetera. We get that information from you as the researcher, research team, investigator, using our electronic submission platform, eBridge. Now, I've been working with IRBs since for a very long time. Let's just say that. That I remember the days, and I think I see some folks here in the meeting as well that would remember the paper forms that we all used to use. And we have graduated now to an electronic submission platform, which is great. Within that electronic submission platform, we call it eBridge. Other institutions may use another electronic platform. There's no universal platform that kind of guides IRB application process. So if you've come from another institution, you may have used a Click Commerce product. You have maybe used something like IRBnet or Iris. There's a lot of platforms that are out there. But at the end of the day, their design is the same, which is to collect the information the IRB needs to do the evaluations and put you on the right review pathway and give you the appropriate determination for the research you are doing. Now, within eBridge, because here at MCW, we have a lot of different types of research. We've got clinical trials, but we also have social behavioral research that is happening. We just have such a wide variety that over the years, we've continued to make improvements into our PRO smart form within eBridge to support giving the right determinations for a variety of different projects. Some of them are research, some of them are not. You'll notice right off the bat, you see case reports, QI projects. And if you go back to that previous slide where I said, these are not necessarily research. However, what we've come to learn is that often journals and other conferences and societies may require a more formal determination letter in support of that decision. Like this is a case report from that's being submitted by you, the IRB, or the designated body within the institution has taken a look and has confirmed this is not research, so you don't need IRB approval. So we've now built supports and a process within our eBridge submission form to be able to give teams those letters when needed. So we've got case reports, we've got QI projects, we even have not human subjects research determinations that can come through. These are all you'll see different aspects of the PRO smart form. We have smart branching that's been built in. And then of course, really, I would say the bread and butter of what most of our applications are, the human subject research applications. And that can be an exemption, it can be minimal risk, or it can be greater than minimal risk. So deciphering IRB terms, this is most of my job all the time. What do these various terms mean? How do we use them interchangeably? Most recently, I received a question that was, I have a QI project and I need an IRB exemption. And how can I get, what's the form I can use to get the letter? And that's like, okay. Let's break this down. What are you doing so that I can help you get into the right review pathway overall? So when we talk about an exemption determination from the IRB, right? It's not meaning, despite what probably everybody's looked it up in Merriam-Webster, does not mean you do not go to the IRB. It's actually a set of determinations and activities from the IRB or the institutionally designated body, right? So here at MCW, that's the IRB. We will take a look at the project to confirm it meets and falls under the specific set of activities. There are 9 categories right now here at MCW. We really focus mostly on 4 because we are still working through the implications of broad consent overall. And those are some new additions, but what we mean by an exempt determination is you've submitted to the IRB with the specific set of activities. The IRB has taken a look and we have confirmed, yes, your research meets the exemption criteria in the federal regulations, and you will get a letter in support of that determination. It will cite the criteria and it'll cite the category of activities that your research falls under. Minimal risk. So minimal risk. It can also apply to exempt activities. So exempt activities really are in that broad swath of minimal risk activities. It could be surveys. It could be looking at observation of focus groups. It could be a record review. Minimal risk is a very broad term. Minimal risk is an aspect that has to be met as part of the criteria for expedited review. So when we talk about minimal risk, we're looking at, is your project, could it be exempt or could it be reviewed under the list of activities and categories of activities that have been defined since 1981 by the federal regulations to fall under expedited criteria. And again, it's slightly deceiving when we say, oh, it's minimal risk, but that's really that kind of hinge point there is if we can't determine that it's exempt, then it's going to go most likely to expedited review if it's minimal risk. Or if there's an additional requirement where we may have to review it out of full committee, still does not mean it's not minimal risk. Greater than minimal risk. Shorthand, often folks will refer to this, I am guilty of this, as this is going to full committee. However, not all full committee items necessarily mean that those activities are greater than minimal risk. Sometimes there's just an aspect or a way that the federal regulations are designed that it requires the review by a fully convened IRB meeting. If anyone is involved in imaging research, right? Or maybe sometimes with in vitro diagnostic research, sometimes those kinds of devices require specific, what we call non-significant risk determinations. Those determinations have to be made by a full committee. It cannot be made by an individual IRB reviewer. So we have to send those to the full committee. It does not mean though that your project is not minimal risk. It can still be minimal risk and still be reviewed by a full committee.
I thought I maybe saw a hand raised. Did somebody on the line have a question?
Just wanted to check. No, this is, whew, I started to try and do a flow chart for this, and let me tell you, whew, the amount of red yarn that I had, just like, and if it's this, then it can go here. No, but really, that's where we ask so many questions in the application, and this is a common, question that I've received, which is why are there 52 sections, Kate, in the MCW PRO smart form? Let me tell you. So many different possible pathways that we could potentially go down, and different aspects when we're looking at ensuring that the criteria for approval have been met, but then we're actually classifying your research under the right review pathway and determinations. Because again, it opens up different questions, for instance, about waivers of consent or alterations of consent, or even if you need consent at all. And so these are the kinds of considerations that we're taking into account when we're asking all of those questions and collecting that information as part of the IRB application overall. So minimal risk, again, this term does get bantered and thrown about a little bit of like, well, what is minimal risk? These folks are just, I'm taking a little bit of extra, specimen during the time of a clinical encounter possibly. That is not necessarily what is defined as minimal risk when we talk about it in the context of research and particularly under the federal regulations. The federal regulations have a wonderful definition of what is minimal risk, and it's the probability or magnitude of harm or discomfort will not be greater than those ordinarily encountered in daily life or during the performance of a routine physical or psychological examination or test. And so oftentimes folks will, you know, state like this is part of clinical care and that this is considered minimal risk, or it's very typical for, you know, how this patient population will be treated. That does not necessarily equate to being minimal risk overall. Again, so we go back to its performance of, like, for instance, a routine physical or psychological examination. Think about it in terms of, you know, my annual physical, I'm not probably having a spinal tap done at that physical. So that is not considered minimal risk, right? But would I be possibly having a lab draw for a blood, you know, again, a peripheral blood draw in my arm because my physician wants to check my insert lab here. Let's go with calcium, done. Then that is, again, part of that performance of a routine physical. And those activities can be considered minimal risk. There's additional caveats around blood draws. And I've provided links here, and I know we'll post this presentation out. So to work around that and to help understand a little bit more of those details around certain types of activities and when they would go above and beyond outside of that definition of minimal risk. So when we have a project, you know, again, this is how the IRB will receive and look at a potential project. We work through first that decision tree. Is this human subject research? Is it research? Does it involve humans? Yes. Great. The next question we'll have is, would this qualify for an exemption? And if we say no, then it goes to, will it qualify for expedited review? No. Then we're at a last step, which is it's full committee at that point. And again, the structure of our IRB submission helps to facilitate that decision process a little bit faster for us on the IRB side of things. Folks will know, and I think many of you probably have experience in the PRO smart form. My favorite section, section 3, is really where a tremendous amount of branching happens, where we'll ask, you know, what kind of activities are involved in your project? Could it be blood draws? Is it surveys? Are you looking at records? Are you going to do some non-invasive data collection? That helps us to really narrow into, is this exempt or is this expedited review? And if you mark no, I have other activities beyond these that are not minimal risk, then you are going to be going to a full committee because it's most likely your research is greater than minimal risk. So for more information, I have provided the links here to, if you're curious about what are those exempt activities, this link works, takes you right to OHRP. We also have the OHRP and FDA expedited review categories. Again, you'll see those commonly on the IRB approval letters here from MCW. We give you the specific categories of activity that we've reviewed it under expedited review. OHRP regulations, a wonderful read. It's fantastic. It really does take you, you know, from the start of what is required to be reviewed by an IRB all the way through to, again, the expectations around consent, the different elements of consent that need to be met. And then, of course, cannot go without saying our FDA regulations as well. There's 2 sets, one for IRBs and then again, one for those clinical investigations. I did not post, but I'm happy to send out the specifics around drugs and devices, otherwise known as 312 and 812. Again, but those are more, you know, designed to the regulation and the criteria around when research is involving an investigational drug or biologic or a device overall. So, questions so far? Any questions? All right, so IRB submissions, I really quick just want to give a shout out to, again, the existing materials that we have available to help support folks as they walk through the process. If you're new or you feel like you need a refresher on how to complete or the guidance around completing an IRB application, first and foremost, start with our eBridge system training. They're great. They get you into the system, help with navigation and that e-learning. We also do have human subjects research in eBridge specific training that our eBridge system group puts together and offers as well. Fantastic. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I did not shout out our HRPP Research Connection series. IRB submissions, it's so much information for us to cover. We've broken it into part 1, part 2. Part 1 is about PROs, part 2 is about amendments, continuing progress reports, and reportable events. Those are offered on a regular basis through our office. I also want to give a shout out to our Reliance group. They have also a part 1, part 2 in supporting applications if, again, you're looking at having sites rely upon MCW IRB, or if you're requesting to have information or us to defer our review over to another institution. So links are going to be provided. You just want to scroll down a little bit for the Research Connection series. And I'm really excited to say that coming hopefully in 2025, we're going to have these videos out there. I can't believe I just said 2025. It used to be a joke. Like, oh, we'll do that in 2025. But we're going to start to try to get these presentations up and posted and much more accessible. So you don't have to wait a couple of months for this next opportunity to come and hear the details of the submissions itself. But again, we're going to give you again that base information so you can keep moving forward overall. All right. So I provided these overviews with regards to this is how a new submission works through the office itself, right? So I have not started all the way back to you've been contacted by a sponsor for a clinical trial. You've signed the non-disclosure agreement and you've begun to receive information. Maybe you've also completed the site information or feasibility worksheets. You're putting stuff into Florence because that's happening all outside of the IRB's scope and review. Really, our standpoint, and it always feels like sometimes we kind of put blinders on, I'll be honest. But we're really focused on, we want to understand that IRB application. That is our vehicle for the review and evaluation of your research. So you're going to start drafting the PRO, hopefully because you've already gotten from your sponsor their protocol. You're going to work on your consent form. You're going to get all of those documents finalized, all the necessary additional supporting documents, maybe the IND support letter, maybe a banking memo, any advertisements, recruitment material, a DSMB charter, data safety monitoring plan. It's like I've reviewed these before. But yeah, so you want to have all of those materials. That's what you're drafting in that drafting the PRO. And that can happen as you're still working with your sponsor to, finalize your budget, develop and get the most up-to-date information. Because maybe again, the sponsor's doing additional changes to the protocol or you're like mid-amendment with them. And so making sure you have all the right changes reflected. You're going to submit the PRO when you're ready to go. And that's a submission button. Your PI has to be the one to submit it. There's attestations that go along with it. First step is going to be departmental review because we want and require the departments for each of the PIs who are submitting to sign off attesting that the PIs have the necessary resources to carry out the research that is being proposed, that they're in good standing, that they're qualified to be able to do this, and then most importantly, that the research that is being put forth is of good and robust scientific design. So that's the departmental review portion of that. Then the next step after the department says yes is ancillary review. And this is where, again, it can kind of spread out into a variety of different reviews. You have institutional biosafety, you have MRI, we have, if you're working with resources over at Children's, there's the Children's Local Context Review, might be cancer, scientific review you're going for as well. These are all ancillary reviews, which will happen before you even get to the IRB office. Those have to be done and resolved and approved. And then it can move forward to the IRB. Once we get in the IRB, we'll do our quick intake. We'll make sure all the documents open. There isn't like a password protected document. Those are always fun when we hit them. And then we'll do a cursory assessment to see which way these projects need to go. Is it gonna go towards, again, greater than minimal risk or our full committees, or is it going more minimal risk? It'll get assigned to the correct committee. Coordinators will start their review. That's where you have most of the conversation and the questions. Again, our coordinators are taking a look at this project. This is the first time they're probably looking at the project. They don't have the context of maybe the 3 months you've been working on this and the deeper understanding of this is how it works. So there's often a fair number of questions that are coming back from the IRB of how is it, how are you maybe identifying your subjects? How are you connecting them to ensure that they are going to XYZ location? What sort of resources are you using? This is all anticipatory because the IRB will probably ask very similar questions. All of our IRB committee members are volunteers. They consist of faculty, but then also individuals from outside of the institution as well. And so when they have an opportunity to review the project, that's after the IRB coordinator has gone through, confirmed all the necessary information is there, they'll send it off to IRB review, get assigned to a meeting or an individual reviewer. That IRB review takes place. Maybe there's more changes or modifications that are identified as a team, the PI, you'll address those. And then hopefully the goal is to ultimately get to IRB approval at that. So if there's more questions, it goes back to IRB review, and that's fine because again, we'll have that conversation, we'll get those questions answered, and making sure then they're reflected in the application that's going to be approved hopefully by the IRB. Amendments follow along the same line. And folks may ask, well, when do I need to submit an amendment? That's a great question. You need to submit an amendment anytime you are proposing a change to the research, right? I liken research to a cookbook, right? It's standardized. There's a set of steps and expectations and measurements that are going to be followed. Clinical care is more, you're cooking in the kitchen. Our investigators and our clinicians have the experience and the training, right? Where they can make more on the fly changes, right? Because again, the outcome is that patient's medical treatment and what's in their best interest overall. Research is really about the standardization and collection of information and data to help inform the potential outcomes and suggestions of treatments going forward. So you want to ensure that there is an ability of the standardization so that the data can be reproduced if necessary to validate then those decisions and recommendations going forward. And that's why the IRB is like, submit to us first if you're implementing a change. Because we need to evaluate what those changes are, and it also too may impact the risk benefit ratio that the IRB originally reviewed the project under, right? So changes to inclusion exclusion criteria, maybe there's, a time where a lab or a safety evaluation would need to be missed because the subject is, or the participant's going to be on vacation. That's where, again, we want to see the documentation around that notification. Is the PI aware? What are adjustments that might need to be made? Or will it just be they'll have that assessment done once they are back and returned? So amendments, again, follow the same process. Sometimes they'll go to ancillary review, but again, we'll come back to the IRB office once it's complete and we'll do our review process. They follow very much the same lines as new submissions overall. Progress reports, otherwise known as CPRs, that's what it is. I promise I am not stating cardiopulmonary resuscitation on here. It's a continuing progress report. All of these happen in the same way. Reminders go out from our eBridge system. There is some data linkage and flow that goes into the Encore system. And for those of you that also have your projects connected in Encore and to Epic, you'll see, again, those reminders about expiration coming up in your Epic dashboard overall for research. So you're going to do the same thing. Again, you're going to draft it, you're going to submit it. If it has to go to ancillary review, that really comes up at the time of 6-year renewal. But then the IRB office will, again, once we receive it, we'll start our process, ask any questions, get any clarifications. Oftentimes it's more just around making sure we fully understand the enrollment numbers. And then if we're looking for data safety monitoring reports, because again, that's information the IRB needs to have to assess if the risk benefit ratio is still acceptable for the overall. All right, that was a lot of submissions. But again, actual specifics about how to complete each sections within those submissions, I really would encourage everyone to attend our Research Connection series. Tim, I'm there as well. We go into a deep dive into helping navigate each and every one of those questions and what the IRB is looking for overall. So Quickly, I'm gonna just touch upon real-time IRB review. Quick show of hands, throw up some hands, folks, or thumbs up if you've participated in a real-time IRB review process for maybe one of your research projects. Even us here in the office, we've done it too. Awesome. Okay. So I've only seen a couple of hands here, but this is great. So this is a unique opportunity here that we have built at MCW in partnership with our friends at the CTSI. If you want to read more about it, because this has gone way back almost to like the mid 2000s. They published a paper on it. And so again, I provided the link here. It is, again, a collaborative innovation to decrease IRB review time. The goal of real-time IRB review is once we receive that IRB, that new application, right? So if we go back to the original, all the other elements to still satisfy. Departmental review, ancillary review. But once the IRB receives it, we are attempting to schedule that submission to an IRB committee meeting within 14 to 20 days after they've been received. So it's incoming. The criteria it has to be a full committee review. So greater than minimal risk studies, clinical trials are great. Must have all of your departmental and ancillary reviews complete. Your PI and your study coordinator must attend the IRB committee meeting when the project is being reviewed. And that's because you have an opportunity to walk through the project with the IRB committee, and then the committee can then ask you questions in real time instead of the back and forth with the modifications. We can get our answers right then. We can then tell you as an IRB what we would like to see potentially changed. Like, can you make this tweak? Can you make that change? Can you get this document? As part of that, there is an online form to request that process. We ask some basic information, such as the need for ancillary review, funding proposal status, and then previous experience with real-time IRB review. And I believe we have Taylor Griffith here today too. She is managing the real-time IRB review process overall. And so Taylor, feel free, jump in if there's anything else that I've missed. Yeah, when I go by the silence of, I'm doing a great job. Okay, so visually, this is how the real-time process actually works. So the team starts with submitting that online form. It comes into our office. Taylor will reach out. We'll start that conversation and then identifying potentially when you're submitting and then flagging it in our system as this is a real-time request so that we can begin to track when it's coming in, right? As a team, though, you're going to need to work with the other committees and those reviews that are required, such as departmental and ancillary review. So this process is only focused on IRB. Unfortunately, those other departmental and ancillary reviews are outside of our scope and we have no control over those. But that is, as a PI and as a research team, that's something that you're going to need to work with and notify those teams to see and confirm how quickly can they get you onto maybe an ancillary reviews agenda. So for MRI or IVC, if you know that they have to have that kind of review, when would your project be going to those? So it's planning ahead and knowing the timelines of the different ancillary institutional reviews that would have to happen as part of this submission process. So work with the committees, but I do encourage, do not demand exceptions. They have their process, real time is our process. So if IBC indicates that they're not going to be able to get you onto their committee meeting until October 1st, then that is the committee meeting that they've set forth for you. So that's, that's something that you can come back, talk to us, let us know where it is in this process overall. We can help you navigate through real time and getting to maybe identify that IRB committee meeting that would be best for your newly submitted project. So once the IRB office receives the project, I like to say we kind of kick it into gear and whoo, everything just goes by really, really fast. IRB review goes very quick. It's almost in tandem with the IRB reviewers at that point as well and taking a look and reviewing it. We get it quickly identified and sent off for an IRB meeting. There's a lot of communication back and forth between the reviewers, the IRB coordinator, and the study team, sort of again, triangulation and working together as as a group in resolving any potential questions or concerns. Then the day of the meeting, the team is invited, comes in to the meeting, answers any questions that may come up as part of the IRB's review. Because again, when it's going to a full committee, you have assigned reviewers, but then the full committee itself will have an opportunity to take a look at it. They may have additional questions as well. And so you can answer those questions quickly. Any mods that are identified, they'll have an opportunity, the research team will have an opportunity to make those changes outside of the meeting. Then it will come back to the committee. They will be notified, and then they'll take a look at those changes and then make a determination from there. And I put IRB review outcome because again, it might be able to be fully approved, or there might be some minor outstanding issues, such as you're waiting for your funding proposal to be finalized, that contract agreement to be finalized with the GCO and your sponsor. And that's something that would just be approved with mods, but then the mod would be, once that contract is finalized, you can send it back to the IRB and we can review it quickly and complete our funding review as well. So those letters will go out within our standard 5 business days. Personal experience, I feel like those go out a little bit faster. That's just personal experience there. But within our policies and procedures, we do have 5 business days to issue out our letters, so but usually they go a bit faster. And that's the IRB real-time review request. So one of the main reasons we focus this on full committees is because, again, those are a bit more complex studies, and also too, our minimal risk studies, those go to a designated IRB reviewer. They don't get seen or reviewed necessarily by a fully convened meeting. And so again, you have that, it's a different workflow process in support of our minimal risk teams overall. Taylor, anything to add?
I don't think so. Just really emphasize that. I just really want to emphasize that you should be working with those ancillary committees. But really the purpose of real time is not to speed up ancillary review. And so those reviews typically still will take some time. And so make sure you allot for that time when you're planning for your review process.
So, because we do work closely too with our colleagues in the Office of Research, the safety committees as well. But they do have their own process, their own committee timelines, and their own committee expectations with review. So we just ask everybody to respect those. All right. In my reference to Ghostbusters, because I was finally catching up on my summer movies now, watching Frozen Empire. Who are you going to call when you have questions? And I'm glad to be joined here today by wonderful, wonderful colleagues of mine, our IRB coordinators, because all of our IRB submissions are reviewed by our IRB coordinators. These folks are on the ground, they are in the trenches, they are on Zoom calls, available on Teams to answer all of your questions. And they will do all of the digging and kind of assessment and pulling together an application before it gets assigned off to one of the IRB committees. I am always eternally grateful for all the work that they do, because they make my job as an IRB reviewer so much easier and straightforward. So breakdown here, these are all of our full committee coordinators here. You will probably see a lot of familiar names because, again, you probably interacted and worked with them throughout the years. And then we have our entire minimal risk teams as well, committees 5 and 7. So quick breakdown, all of this information is posted on our website too, but just in case you weren't sure, like, when does committee 1 meet? We meet proudly on the 1st and 3rd Mondays of the month. Yes, go committee 1. Can't help, I'll rep my own committee right here, done. But everyone else's schedule is posted here. We have meeting times, those are capped at 2 hours, but our agendas are jam-packed. On average, we have anywhere between 15 to 20 items and submissions that we are reviewing over that 2-hour period. We are hustling. Yep, that is it. And our agendas are sent out 10 days in advance before the meeting. Again, all of our IRB members though are volunteer, and many of them are also doing expedited reviews outside of the committee agendas as well. So that 10 days really does give an opportunity, 1, to get some questions, addressed, but then also to just to also give another opportunity and the time for our faculty to be able to take a look and evaluate fully some of the complex studies that we are seeing come through. And they're good, they're great. But it does take oftentimes a couple of hours to really kind of dig into them. So minimal risk, for the most part, they do not meet as an IRB committee, but they do on occasion have items that do need to be reviewed by the convened meetings. These are their meeting times for 5 and 7. A lot of their reviews are conducted independently by the assigned individual IRB reviewers outside of the meetings themselves. Meetings are really focused for them on NSR determinations, maybe perso or serious or continuing non-compliance determinations, or if they make recommendations for the suspension or termination of IRB approval. Those are all very, very serious and very, very rare. But those are, again, all the reasons why potentially a convened meeting for a minimal risk study does happen. And then last but not least is our safety and treatment use committee. Scott Brooks is the coordinator for this. And that committee meets weekly. Oftentimes they're reviewing reportable events or urgent amendments that need to make changes quickly to respond to safety issues that have been identified. Or he's helping to facilitate a lot of single patient treatment use requests to ensure that the appropriate IRB review has been completed to be able to facilitate getting access for a patient to an investigational product at that time. So we work real close on that and quickly. And I thought I just saw a hand. Maybe not, okay. So I want to open it up really quick. At this point, accident, that happens. So who has questions about submissions? And I have Jacob Kroll, I have Ashley Hughes, I see Steph Bensman up here, and possibly Vanessa, she was in.
And I think I saw a hand for Joe. You're welcome to unmute yourself. If that was not an accidental hand.
It was an accidental hand, sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
I'm about to run a research study on.
I feel less crazy because I thought I saw a hand way over here. So.
Awesome. But I thought I would bring them here because again, every time these folks will be able to answer those specific questions. Okay.
I think you can see the full thing, but it says, does PI need to be present for the minimal risk meeting? Or I'm sorry, for the greater than minimal risk meeting?
In just for a regular review or for real time? I don't know.
It's from Paula.
Paula, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Real time.
Real time. You know what? I'm gonna turn it over to Ashley and Jacob here.
Or Taylor, you can jump in too, but
There we go. I've got a crew here, so yep.
Yeah, so anytime a project is being reviewed via real-time review, the PI is required to be present.
Okay.
Any
from our question.
Yeah.
Ask a quick question. If
Yes.
it's, yeah, I'm not a CRC, but I'm going to be submitting. How do we know whether ancillary or departmental review is necessary? Like, do we who are contacts? How
Yeah.
to figure that out?
Yeah.
So,
This one.
yeah, when I'm doing like a review, like I'll typically go through the protocol and kind of search for like key terms and things like that. IBC is required if you're getting anything, like any biospecimens for research purposes. So if you're taking blood, if you're taking, biopsies, anything like that automatically goes to IBC. Other things like chest x-rays, PET scans, things like that might not have to go. But Leo Kaiser's the Office of Radiation Safety person, and he can answer those questions. And then for like MRI, that typically has to go to the MRI Safety Committee, and then you just check those ancillary boxes within the PRO smart form. And then before it even gets to our office, it'll go through all those reviews. So then you can work with those specific departments to get
Okay.
those approvals.
And I'm with none of those things, then I probably don't.
Probably don't, yeah, yep, and if there, I mean, sometimes there's surprises,
Yeah.
and so that's my job to help figure out what we need and send you back to the appropriate people.
Awesome, thank you.
That's such a good question about ancillary reviews, because yeah, it's.
It's a great area.
Yeah, it is, but we have, actually referred to this, right? There is a section in the PRO Smart Form, you'll hit it, it's section 4. Sorry to get a little wonky about this specific. Once you live and breathe in the PRO Smart Form for a while, you just start to rattle off all the numbers. But, it gives a list of, the types of activities, and then there is logic that has been built into the submission process that will then flag for those committees. So in some ways, it's great, it's kind of hands-off. You're like, yes, I am working with viral vectors and an XYZ. Got it, boom, it's gonna kick you over to IVC, done, the end. But then there's other times where it might not have been as apparent. And then that's when, again, our coordinators might pick it up in reading the description of the procedures or references to other documents, maybe in the protocol, it might reference a chest x-ray or a CT. And again, so in certain types because it's in CTs involve radiation, welcome to, you're going over to radiation safety at that point. And we'll have them double check, and it's a very seamless process where now we can kind of send it back to them, and then they can give us the confirmation and send it back. And we'll have it in our hands once again for the IRB survey. Other questions about the submission process? Real time? Who's excited now to sign up for real time? Taylor, brace yourself. It's a really, I think, neat process, and it's fascinating, I think, for folks to then kind of see the inner workings of what's happening on the IRB as well, too. Yeah, you get to meet a lot of the committee members. They're great. We're fantastic. All right, Shane, you got a question? I think I can view this.
Oh my goodness, I am not sure how my hand got up. Sorry about that.
What? That's a flirt.
I will.
They have, is it because
Small
of the,
tallies.
so
It might be like.
Zoom and like they have the like gesture recognition now, it's so annoying.
So glad
It's
I
like-
have that turned off. I
Oh,
like to
yeah.
talk a lot with my, which is actually not stop. Hands on raise.
I did just stretch. That might have been it.
Oh,
See,
weird.
now we
Yeah,
have
it's
figured
like
this out.
been kind of
Okay.
causing
Okay.
some, yeah.
Fantastic. Oh. Also, maybe I haven't touched upon, but you're just like, you know what? I'll reach out later. Good news, you should ask the question now, because if you have that question, it could be another colleague of yours has a similar question. And you've got a lot of experience here from the IRB, and we'd be happy to answer it. So reportable events. Anyone? Happy to get into those.
Okay, then I'll bring
Yes.
up another one, not reportable events.
Okay.
So what I am, yeah, sorry, my project is kind of really boring, but I know I have to go through this. So there's an external IRB that's running this project, but it's a bank, and so I've been told I have to do it through, I have to get approval through MCW's IRB.
Okay.
But how does that work when there's an external IRB and I kind of need MCW's IRB to look at it?
Yep. So it really does depend then upon.
And it's one of the rare commercial ones, just as.
Yes, I love those rare commercial ones. That's where I began my work. So in that case, if it's an external IRB that is providing the oversight, for instance, of a bank, right? Then that's the limitation of what they're actually providing the oversight of, is just really the retention and the materials and the distribution. But for each investigator who is wishing to, I really like this banking analogy, to withdraw data from that bank, that's where you need to have then your own IRB approval as you.
I'm not withdrawing, I'm putting into.
You're putting into.
Yeah, I'm
Oh, you're
depositing.
Contributing. Oh, fantastic. In that case, then it's the same sort of premise,
Okay.
right? Is then we are covering the collection activities and then depositing activities for our site here into then this larger. Let's just use NIH for instance, because I know they have a lot of massive, large banks that are all reviewed by NIH as external IRBs. That would then cover then their activities of the maintenance and ongoing support for the bank itself, those retention activities, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a helpful
Yep.
way to understand this piece of it. Cool.
And banking is one of those, if you use that term for to other institutions, they're like, what are you talking about? We're just trying to do research here. So you might also hear it referenced as, you know, we have a biorepository we're establishing, or a data repository, or we're keeping this for
Future unspecified.
future unspecified research. Maybe some exploration down the line. Those are all. Those will perk our ears up in the IRB. We're like, that's it. Are you keeping this? How do we have permission? And let's make sure you have the right permission overall. Other questions? I do a quick survey. How many folks are dealing mostly with clinical trials, full committee, or greater than minimal risk research? Throw your hands up. I know now I'm gonna do it. This is, yep. Stretching, okay. And then folks that are dealing mostly with minimal risk. Awesome. So I think the nice part is the submission process for either full committee or minimal risk, very similar. You'll have different questions that may populate in the smart form itself, but the overall process is identical. Whether you're going full committee or you're gonna be seen by one of our minimal risk committees and individual IRB reviewers. So we tried to keep it similar in that way. So you don't have to access different types of application forms. You can come to eBridge, it's one stop shopping, I like to say.
There's a question in the chat.
Yes.
It says, if we receive DMC recommendations, SUSARs, I don't know if I'm saying that acronym correctly, et cetera, do you want those submitted as an amendment when received or at CPR?
That's a tricky question. And also the most common response often given by the IRB. I gotta think about that for a moment. I would say it does depend upon the context of what is being recommended by the DMC. So if the DMC is recommending changes that need to be implemented because they've observed or identified safety trends or concerns, or the need to change the inclusion/exclusion criteria for a particular project, you might be actually diving into the realm of reportable event/amendment. And it really just does depend upon what information is being immediately shared with the sites from the sponsor. So it could be you're sending us a reportable event to let us know of the urgency of these changes. And so again, the IRB can assess the risk benefit ratio of the particular project. And you can reference, the sponsors in the process of updating the protocol and the consent forms, and these will be submitted at a later date. The IRB then is aware of what we should be expecting for, again, an amendment coming shortly, hopefully. If there are no changes, it's, continue study as designed. I love that phrase. Then that's a great opportunity. You can provide that in your continuing progress report again. So it's demonstrating, and we would expect that the committee has met, they've evaluated the safety data, and at this time they have not seen any areas of concern and that they are comfortable with continuing the study as designed. Great question. Any others?
Seriously, right?
Those are so tricky. They really are. For SUSARs, those are often, again, individualized patient reports, of items that are coming and having to be distributed per the sponsor's responsibility to the FDA, out to the participating sites. And so I would actually instead evaluate those SUSARs using our reporting criteria to the IRB policy, to identify whether or not those SUSARs are rising to the level of an unanticipated problem involving risk to subjects or others, otherwise known as the use perso. And evaluate it there. Otherwise, you are still, though, your PIs should be evaluating, they should be documenting those evaluations. So when your monitors are arriving, that those evaluations are occurring and that assessment's been made again, whether it's unanticipated, related, and or increases risk of harm than previously was identified. Questions? Not. This has been fantastic, y'all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again, CCSI, for having us. And just to say